A few weeks ago, the Albanese Labor government announced a major revision to its original tax reform plans, marking not just a shift in its fiscal policy, but a reflection of its broader economic agenda as well. The government has long argued that Australia needs to become a more productive, innovative, and complex economy, one that relies less on raw exports and more on high value industries like renewables, advanced manufacturing, and technology. But with ongoing pressures from inflation, slow productivity growth, and political challenges, some wonder whether Labor's ambitions are being diluted. In today's episode, we're unpacking the Albanese government's economic agenda, the problems Labor believes it's facing Australia today, and how they plan to tackle it. So today, we're splitting this video into two parts. First is the Albanese government's economic agenda, and second, a look into the government's tax plans. Over the past year, the government has announced three main goals for the economy. The first is to boost productivity, the second is strengthening economic stability, and the third is improving budget sustainability. At the heart of the Albanese government's agenda is the belief that Australia must increase productivity, making the economy more dynamic and efficient. A common misconception about productivity reform is that it means working harder or longer hours. In reality, productivity is about working smarter and allocating resources effectively, not necessarily working harder. Productivity measures how efficiently inputs like labour and capital are turned into outputs or goods and services. So, productivity growth happens when workers and businesses can produce more value with the same or fewer resources. When a government wants to improve productivity, it has three main ways it can go about it. The first and fastest to implement is workforce and regulatory reforms. Things such as streamlining regulation or cutting red tape, so to speak, can speed up projects, reduce costs for businesses, and allow workers to get on with the job. A government can also increase competition by lowering the barriers of entry for businesses. Other policies, such as abolishing non-compete clauses for low to middle income earners and investing in public funds, can also be some ways in which a government can quickly boost productivity. The second path is making reforms directly within the workforce and education sector. Free or subsidised TAFE, targeted investment in education, or amending the curriculum can lead to more skilled workforces. The government can also invest in R&D as well as technology and AI to enhance but not replace employee work. Reforms in these sectors can also reduce things like structural unemployment, where individuals can be upskilled and get back into the workforce. The third option is through infrastructure and energy investment. By improving government services such as roads, energy and facilities, you improve the environment for workers, businesses and the general public. Whether that be reduced travel time on roads because of highway upgrades or cheaper energy, it has an impact on productivity. According to Dr. Andrew Lee MP, the Albanese government is focusing on three areas: individuals, infrastructure and institutions. Reforms in the TAFE and university sector, Medicare and bulk billing reforms, and investment in digital and physical infrastructure have been the aim of boosting productivity for the government. The government is also committed to a new national competition policy designed to lift dynamism and reduce barriers to entry. Despite this, the government has not emphasised or addressed technology or R&D, reforms on bureaucratic efficiency, or direct measures to encourage business investment or entrepreneurship. Now, the second and often lesser talked about goal of the Albanese government is for Australia to become a more complex economy. Building new industries around renewable energy, defence manufacturing, critical minerals, and digital technologies are just some of the ways the government plans to do this. As it stands, Australia is currently based on what has been coined a holes and homes economy, where a majority of the country is comprised of primary and tertiary industries, which generate low value added or so-called basic products, such as coal, iron, wood, wool, or just reselling products. The problem with this situation is that most of the products we produce are low value, which limits profit margins, wages, and technological progress. This becomes especially problematic for export-driven economies like ours, for two main reasons. First, commodity prices are highly volatile in the international market. Because we are so interconnected with the global economy, downturns abroad quickly affect us at home. In fact, whether our national budget ends up in surplus or deficit often depends on the price of key exports, such as iron ore and coal, and the performance of mining companies. Second, Australia primarily exports low value added goods and imports high value added products. As a result, we send more wealth overseas than we often bring in, reducing long term economic benefits of trade. The other problem for Australia is that much of our household and corporate wealth is stored in what's called portfolio investment, rather than direct investment. Housing, a prime example of this, is largely unproductive and doesn't create ongoing economic output in the way producing goods or services does. These types of investments generally focus on asset acquisition rather than wealth creation, which can worsen issues such as wealth inequality and diverts potential capital away from productive sectors. The Albanese government's future Made in Australia plan aims to make the economy more robust and complex to mitigate some of the aforementioned problems, to make the economy more resilient to global forces, and an attempt to generate wealth for the country. The initiative aims to introduce $22.7 billion over 10 years to implement clean energy and advanced manufacturing in the country. Funding priorities include hydrogen production, critical mineral processing, solar panel manufacturing, and battery production. Despite this, however, the government hasn't discussed how it plans to tackle capital allocation, corporate investment incentives, and so-called unproductive asset classes, with the government 3 weeks ago scaling back superannuation and other portfolio taxes in favour of lighter reforms due to public scrutiny. While some of those reforms seem quite easy to implement and seem to be progressing, the government also has to deal with budget sustainability and fiscal viability. And this is where we talk about Labor's tax policies. The Labor government has updated its superannuation tax reform, which will start on July the 1st, 2026. The main change is that people with super balances over $3 million will still pay more in tax, but the system will now be fairer and simpler. Instead of taxing unrealised capital gains or profits on investments that haven't actually been sold, the new plan will only tax realised gains, so money that's actually been earned. This removes one of the biggest criticisms of the original proposal. Under the revised plan, super balances over 10 million will face a 40% tax rate, while balances between 3 million and 10 million will face the standard higher rate announced earlier. These thresholds will now be indexed to inflation, meaning they'll rise over time to keep up with the cost of living and prevent less people from being unfairly caught into the tax system. The government is also giving extra support to low-income earners. The Low-Income Super Tax Offset, or LISTO, will rise from 310 to 810, and the income limit for eligibility will increase from $37,000 to $45,000 by 2027. This means more low and middle income workers, as well as young people, will get a boost to their retirement savings, helping to make the system fairer overall. The government will collect a little bit less revenue than before though, about $2 billion in the first year instead of $2.7 billion under the original plan. However, it still raises substantial revenue from the very largest of super balances, while being fairer and more practical to the smaller and more middle-income individuals. However, despite these revisions, opposition leader Susan Ley says the government's revisions weaken the budget and reflect a lack of fiscal discipline. But Labor argues that sustainable productivity growth, not harsh austerity, is the key to long-term fiscal stability. As it stands, the government faces budget deficits for the rest of the decade, which will likely mean it will take a more reserved, pragmatic approach regarding its reforms. It also faces challenges such as the rental and vacancy crisis in many cities, and Australians facing financial hardship, but is in a unique position with the current coalition opposition being effectively broken, and with more options to pass legislation in the Senate. Thank you for watching. If you've enjoyed this video of Labor's breakdown and evolving economic agenda, be sure to subscribe and to hit the bell so you can never miss an update. Once again, I'm Heath Clark, thank you for watching, and I'll see you next time.